Once upon a time, there was a little girl who lived in a village near the forest. Whenever she went out, the little girl wore a Red Riding cloak, so everyone in the village called her Little Red Riding Hood. One morning, Little Red Riding Hood asked her mother if she could go to visit her grandmother, as it had been a while since they'd seen each other. "That's a good idea," her mother said. So they packed a nice basket for Little Red Riding Hood to take to her grandmother. When the basket was ready, the little girl put on her red cloak and kissed her mother goodbye. "Remember, go straight to Grandma's house," her mother cautioned. "Don't dawdle along the way, and please don't talk to strangers." "Yes, Mother," Little Red Riding Hood said. "I'll be careful." But when Little Red Riding Hood noticed some beautiful flowers in the forest, she forgot her mother's warning and she picked a few to give to her grandmother. Meanwhile, a wolf spotted Little Red Riding Hood and approached her. "Good morning, Little Red Riding Hood," the wolf said. "Good morning, Mr. Wolf," she replied politely. "Where are you going so early in the morning, Little Red Riding Hood?" the wolf asked. "I'm going to my grandmother's house," she said. "She lives in the forest, near the end of the path," the wolf grinned. "What's in your basket?" "Some cakes and a pot of butter. My mother made them for my grandmother." Little Red Riding Hood replied. The wolf's eyes lit up at the thought of the delicious food. "Does your grandmother live far away?" he asked. "Not too far," Little Red Riding Hood said. "Just beyond the clearing," the wolf nodded. "Well then, I'll see you around," he said, and with that, he trotted off into the forest. Little Red Riding Hood continued along the path until she reached her grandmother's house. She knocked on the door. "Who is it?" her grandmother called. "It's me, Little Red Riding Hood," she replied. "I've brought you some cakes and butter." "Come in, my dear," her grandmother said. When Little Red Riding Hood entered the cottage, she noticed that her grandmother looked very strange. "Grandmother, what big ears you have!" she exclaimed. "All the better to hear you with, my dear," her grandmother replied. "And grandmother, what big eyes you have!" she said. "All the better to see you with, my dear," her grandmother replied. "And grandmother, what big teeth you have!" she said. "All the better to eat you with." The wolf suddenly leaped out of bed and lunged at Little Red Riding Hood. Just then, a woodcutter who was chopping wood nearby heard the commotion and ran to the cottage. He burst through the door and grabbed the wolf just as he was about to devour Little Red Riding Hood. The wolf struggled and tried to escape, but the woodcutter held him tightly and eventually managed to kill him. Little Red Riding Hood and her grandmother embraced, thankful to the woodcutter for saving them. From that day on, Little Red Riding Hood never strayed from the path and always listened to her mother's warnings about talking to strangers. And she and her grandmother lived happily ever after.